Je pense sans cesse à toi.
Hello and welcome to The Foretop. It's a roundtable discussion of today's hot-button topics in food and beverage. I'm your host, Catherine Cole. On episode 39, we will discuss the culinary publishing industry. First, food magazines are dead. Is now the perfect time to start up a food magazine? Next, new directions for cookbooks. And finally, self-publishing goes ultra-luxe. In the studios of OPB today, I'm joined by Nick Fauchald. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Close enough.
I pronounce it differently every time I say his name.
Okay.
It's good to be mysterious, right?
Pronounce your last name for me.
Fauchald.
Fauchald.
Yeah.
Okay. In the studios of OPB today, I'm joined by Nick Fauchald, publisher of Short Stack Editions and editorial director of Little Sue, and that is spelled S-O-U-S. Welcome, Nick.
Thanks for having me.
And Christina Henry de Tessan, vice president of editorial for Girl Friday Productions, a book production company. Hello, Christina.
Great to be here.
And Martha Holmberg, CEO of the International Association of Culinary Professionals and the founder of Fine Cooking Magazine. Good to see you, Martha.
Thank you very much. Good to be back.
All right, well, let's nibble into our first course, the state of food magazines. Modern Farmer and Lucky Peach have shut their doors. Food and Wine recently moved its offices from New York City to Birmingham, Alabama. Saveur recently announced a major round of layoffs. So what is going on? Martha Holmberg, the magazine you founded, Fine Cooking, still seems to be chugging along, although you also founded a terrific food magazine called Mix that ultimately shut its doors. So I would love to hear your perspective on what is going on with culinary periodicals right now.
Well, and can we say R.I.P. Mix? It was such a fun magazine, of which
so
you were an
good.
important part, Catherine. It was so great in the days. It all comes down to financial models that have been completely disrupted by the internet. Magazines make money from people who buy them, so subscribers are buying off the newsstand, but they make most of their money off of advertising. And that whole model has changed since we don't need print advertising in the same way that we did before. And I think, companies are just finding it costs a lot of money to produce content, and it costs a lot of money to market the magazines and find those subscribers that they can then deliver to the advertisers.
So why is Fine Cooking still seemingly chugging along healthily? Well,
Fine Cooking, which is published by the Taunton Press, has always had a little bit of a different financial model, and I don't want to get too weedy here, in spreadsheets and stuff, but they built their revenue model where they would charge more for the magazine itself. So you pay $6 or $7 for a copy of Fine Cooking, and you pay about the same whether you subscribe or buy it on the newsstand. So they were getting more of the money from the people reading the magazine and less proportionally from the advertisers. And so even when, the world economy crashed a few years ago, advertising spends went down, they were still getting a nice healthy amount of money from the reader. And it's a model that I think a lot of other publishers are kind of coming around to now. They're realizing we can't just do whatever it takes to get somebody looking at our magazine and then sell that to an advertiser. We need people who are really engaged with our content, really will pay money for it, and will become loyal to the brand, right?
Well, so Nick, you've worked for a number of culinary magazines, including Food and Wine, and you also founded an online culinary publication, Tasting Table. So I want to hear your perspective on all this.
Yeah, I mean, the timing of my career was really interesting in that I graduated college and started working in magazines right before September 11. So I kind of jumped into it, I think, at the high water mark. Everything was going great. There was lots of money. Advertising was robust. And then September 11th happened, and, we saw that first shockwave hit print publications and kind of shake up how where the money was coming from in terms of advertisers. Then things settled down for a while. I moved to New York City. I started working in larger food magazines. Things were great. And then in the summer of 2008, these folks approached me about starting a website. And I remember talking to my boss and my colleagues at Food and Wine at the time about this opportunity, which sounded really interesting. And they were all like, you're crazy. You're at this great magazine. Everything's really safe here.
Nick, that wasn't the first time people have called you crazy, so I'm sure.
But it was, and I had no inside information. I had no foresight whatsoever. I just saw an opportunity to start something new. It didn't matter that it was a website. So that's why I took it. 2 weeks later, and what was it, like right after we launched, actually, the stock market crashed. That was October 2008. And that really shook things up. That's when we started seeing layoffs. My old job probably wouldn't have existed then. And for me, that was the start of a new era of the business model and in media. And so I got to kind of go through that with Tasting Table and some other companies I worked for there. That's all changed now. It's really hard to make money as an online media company. And
yeah, because isn't Tasting Table just you get a free email? I mean, how is it? Is it funded through advertising?
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. And it was originally a newsletter-driven business, and that's when the cost for advertising in a higher-end newsletter was very expensive, many times more expensive than a magazine, hundreds of times more expensive than a website. So it was very like premium audience, premium content. That has changed in the 10 years since. And the big guys like BuzzFeed and the little guys like small independent sites, meaning they only have 1 million or 2 impressions a month, they don't know how to make money anymore. And it's because of there being just a couple of gatekeepers to the financials of advertising, and they keep switching up their algorithm or they keep switching up their priorities. And everyone's looking around right now and trying to figure out where the money's going to come from in the next few years. So part of the reason why I'm out here in Portland this week working on a new company that will have a website and sell ads. It will have a newsletter and sell ads in the newsletter. We're launching a magazine. We'll sell ads there. And we don't even consider that enough to support the business. It's, the majority of our revenue will come through more experiential and tangible things that we're selling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a few episodes ago, we had Christopher Kimball on, and along with Matthew Card from Christopher Kimball's Milk Street, and they were talking about how they go around the country doing live shows and live classes, and that's a big part of their business model. So you can't just start, it sounds like you can't just start up a publication anymore.
Experiential media is the thing you keep hearing now, and it makes sense. That's what people are willing to pay for these days.
I think a good example of that is Cherry Bomb, which I think they may just have 2 issues a year, a big, fat, beautifully produced magazine about women in food, but they have their Cherry Bomb Jubilee, which is a day-long conference, and they've just launched one on the West Coast. I think they have some merchandise things happening, and they have a podcast. And so the brand began as a magazine, but that's, as Nick just said, that's not enough. So they're really kind of reaching out. But I think a print magazine is a really brilliant way to sort of establish a brand look and feel and identity, because it's an object, you can share it. It's got, they're the unbeatable aspects of something tactile, more so than just things moving on your screen. And it's, it sort of is your flag that you're raising, saying this is who we are, and then you can spin other products out from that. But especially because print is a little bit rare now, it feels more valuable in a way.
Yeah, it's novel and it's niche, and the niche magazines are the ones that are doing well.
And I think there's a lot to be said for the curated experience of the magazine. Sometimes I don't want to curl up with my laptop and have the entire world at my fingertips. I want something that has a beginning.
Stuff of nightmares.
Right. A beginning, a middle, an end. And it's got closure, which is really satisfying in a way that just drifting from one article to the next and the next post doesn't quite give the same experience. So.
Sometimes I think I'm trying to fool myself into thinking that magazines are a viable, thing to make, but I think that's true. People, the novelty of it, if you can find an audience who's willing to pay for it, and there's still a lot of people who want to hold something and read it. Doesn't mean that's the only thing they want to do, and doesn't mean that's the only thing your publication should do. If we're talking about food magazines and who's left standing and who's fallen. The media companies who were doing a really good job supporting the magazine through their online efforts and vice versa are the ones still standing. The ones that were too slow to that, I think, are the ones that are going down.
What about also doing fewer magazines each year and having them be more sort of robust sort of objects that you would hang on to?
Well, I found that, this is Martha, I found that is a wonderful dream, but it works, it's difficult to make that work, first of all, on the newsstand.
Right.
You need to have your title sitting there anytime somebody comes through. If they don't see it because you're sold out or because your quarterly isn't going to come out for another month or two, you don't exist, not to mention just technical problems with distribution and that kind of thing. So, I think, I'm not sure you really save that much in the end. And you do want to really be part of someone's life. And they don't have to. It's great to have some anticipation. Can't wait till my next issue comes. But if you're waiting for 4 months, that's tough.
To me, it's just a siren song or a swan song. Siren song, a swan song of magazines going from 12 issues to 10 issues to 8 issues to 6 to 4, and then they're done.
Yeah,
and that's going on. We're seeing that happen to some beloved food magazines too. And it's I hope it turns back around, but I don't think less is more in that case.
Well, okay, so Nick, when we were talking about what we were going to talk about on this episode, you said you don't think there could be a better time to start a food publication. So why do you think that?
Yeah, I mean, that was slightly a warm take, but...
because he's crazy. His colleagues said it before.
Because, one, the talent pool is very deep. There's a lot of folks who were working in magazines who no longer are. That was something that prompted us to start Short Stack 5 years ago. My partner and I had come from magazines. We had worked with all these talented recipe developers and testers and food writers, and we saw them and ourselves having fewer places to get our work out there and fewer opportunities to get paid for it and get paid fairly for it. So we're trying to create a place to celebrate those folks. Kind of a lot of them, what we consider the unsung heroes of the food world. So that's part of it, is that there's a big talent pool. I also think, there's less competition. I was really sad to see Lucky Peach go because they had such a strong identity. And, I think that magazine, that brand probably could have survived longer if they had decided they wanted it to. But I remember when this went down, it was almost exactly 10 years ago when Gourmet folded. Mm-hmm. They made the huge mistake, Condé Nast made a huge mistake of killing the entire brand at once versus saying, magazine publishing no longer makes sense for us right now. So we're going to pivot and do more. We're going to keep this brand alive, but we're going to shift our focus, shift our platform to something else. And they didn't do that quickly enough. And so the brand kind of dissolved, and they did that too soon. But yeah, why is it a good time to start a magazine? Mostly to be contrarian about it.
Yeah, I would say that I think it's a great time to start a magazine from a creative and editorial point of view. And, there's occasional talk about could we restart Mix magazine, Mm-hmm. But financially, I'm not sure there is an obvious solution. You're taking a risk, and it depends on how valuable the content is going to be.
But if it's a component, so we're starting a kids cooking magazine. That's not where all our chips are in. Right. That is something that's supporting and promoting the rest of everything else that we're trying to sell and to give people. But it completely makes sense in that ecosystem. And it's almost necessary. Well, you need to, if you're going to pay money for something,
yes,
it's nice to have something that you can hold because of that membership.
Right. Well, let's shift gears here and move to our second course and talk about rethinking the form. Nick, a second ago you were talking about Short Stack Editions, which you founded and publishes possibly the world's most understated cookbooks. I'm thinking maybe we need to rethink the form of the magazine, but let's talk about reinventing the cookbook right now. It seems like right now we're in this mode where social media stars, culinary celebrities, and big-name restaurants are kind of driving this image-driven cookbook that we're seeing everywhere, but maybe we just need to rethink this entirely and reinvent it. And I kind of like how Short Stack Editions doesn't follow any of the rules. So can you quickly describe to us what a Short Stack Editions cookbook looks like? And then maybe we can hear from Martha, who I think wrote one.
She did.
Yes, she did.
So they're small format, 4.5 by 7.5 inches, 48 pages long. Really like a zine size, but slightly better quality, paper and printing and design than a zine is meant to be, something that looks very homemade. And we purposely called them books because we didn't want to get slotted in with the economics and the magazine distribution channels, because you couldn't make money that way. So we conveniently kind of called them somewhere hybrid magazine cookbooks. So they have a long shelf life, long newsstand life, and stores display them like they would like gift size books. We don't have photography in there, one, because I think photography in any format, magazine, book, newspaper, completely timestamps whatever content it's supporting. And that's good for a few months or a couple of years, and then it becomes super dated. And we wanted something a little bit more timeless. And to be honest, economics of not taking photos and not trying to print something that would display those photos nicely was a big thing too. But, I do a lot of cookbook, like large format cookbook work, and I would love a publisher to not demand that we have photos in one of these cookbooks. I look back at all the cookbooks I keep around and that I cherish. None of them have pictures in them. The ones that have pictures in them, I tend to, even if I love the cookbook, I was looking at Tom Colicchio's first books, which were like 2001, 2003. Those look like books that were published in 2001. and in that moment, it looked super contemporary and timely, but now it kind of, you almost don't want to cook from it because the food looks so different than what you're used to looking at.
Well, wait, Christina, I just saw you make a face, and you produce books for a living, so.
I do. First of all, I love the Short Stack Editions.
Thank you.
They're just like candy. I just wanted to own them all. But I actually love the direction that cookbooks are going these days. I'm mad for the high design. I think that these books are no longer just pure instruction manuals, but they're lifestyle books. They're works of art in themselves. I feel like they're pushing boundaries aesthetically, and they're not just for cooks anymore. I know a lot of people who just want to curl up and absorb, and there's much more sort of story and personality. They're infused. There's just a lot more dimension to them. So I guess I'm pro-design. I'm pro-photo.
I am too. I don't disagree with that at all. And, I spend a lot of my time making books that have design and photography in them, but I wish some publishers could see the value in a book that doesn't look like it was made this year. And whether that's making something that's deliberately retro or I'm always trying to find a style of photography that will stand out and be so different and kind of weird that it will never be able to be slotted in with some other fad. And it's hard. It's so hard because trends, visual trends now are changing daily, weekly, and they used to. I can look at a cookbook and say that was from 2005, or that's from the early 80s, and now I can't because everything changes so quickly.
Martha, you've written some very traditional cookbooks, I would say, like crepes, puff pastry, and modern, or it's called puff, sorry, I got the, and modern sauces. Mm-hmm. But you've also written a Short Stack Editions book. Is it on plums, am I remembering?
Plums,
yes.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So what's your perspective? What form do you prefer for a cookbook, and where do you see this going?
I think we're never going to get away from photography because I think our society is becoming more and more visual anyway. We take in a lot of information visually now, more so than we did a few decades ago. And so just from an instructional point of view, I know, readers like to see what the dish is going to look like. That being said, I'm with Christina. I feel like there's a lot more leeway in book publishing. There's more variety. People are open to a little more. I mean, I'm hopeful. I feel like we're coming off that really unfortunate phase where it's only the TV superstars or the diet books that can get the big advances, that can be highly produced, and that can sell a lot. We still are having that. I just was looking at some news where, the Pioneer Woman's 6th cookbook just sold 500,000 copies, which if you don't know that, that's a lot of copies for a cookbook.
Right.
Many books sell 5 and 6 and 7 and 8,000 copies. But then on the other hand, I have a friend, Jodi Eddy, who's a cookbook author. She just got a book deal to do a cookbook of monastery food, monasteries around the world.
Wow.
So that's obviously niche, smaller, but a special interest where there's going to be a certain audience that really loves that. It'll have photography, but it's different. I've just been working on a book on fermentation by Noma, Rene Redzepi's big famous chef based out of Copenhagen. And that's going to just be all sort of line drawings and very technical, almost like textbook style photography. So, but his last book was one of those over the top, highly produced coffee table kind of art object, like a monograph book. So there really is, I think we're pushing the edges of what people are interested in. And everybody is looking for more original voices. And going back to the magazine idea, there's the standard mass market titles that are all doing a good job, but people are kind of craving more authenticity and originality, and I think that flows into cookbook publishing as well. You may not get very much money for that, for the monastery book, but most book authors are doing it not for the money. They're doing it for the passion or because it supports another aspect of their business, and if they're lucky, they'll earn some money off of it.
Well, I think you've hit on something that I also think is really fun and appealing about this new generation of books, which is the personal narrative and the sort of food as a lens into another culture. And there's a lot. There are so many books right now with the author's childhood, pictures of them as children cooking with their moms, and there's something immensely appealing about that human story behind the food. So.
Yeah, I think you were mentioning earlier the Kachka cookbook, and we had Bonnie and Dina on the show recently.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that cookbook.
They do a great job in the first part of their book about, telling her about her relationship with that culture and sort of overcoming the obstacles to cooking presenting Soviet cuisine to the world. And so I thought she made it very human and attractive and made me want to go to a restaurant.
So, am I remembering correctly? Did Girl Friday work on the Pike Place Market Fish Guys cookbook? Talk about a unique personality and point of view.
Well, my colleague got to work on that. She collaborated with the Fish Guys, and I think one of the highlights of her career was getting to go and actually throw fish from behind the counter at the market. And I think it was very intense to get, because I think they have a very distinct brand, distinct voice, and also philosophy. And so I think there was a lot to learn beyond fish recipes. I think it was really getting into the full experience of how they work together. And I think that was she had a lot of fun with that one.
I'm curious, where do you guys think, I get a different answer every time I talk to a publisher, like what types of cookbooks are you concentrating on? What are you looking for? And some are leaning heavily into their tentpole personalities and brands, like the Pioneer Woman, and doing very little else. And some are going the opposite direction and focusing on more single subject, simple, less expensive, like gift category cookbooks. The thing I have been hearing more and more of is the so-and-so's restaurant cookbook is not really working unless that chef, that restaurant is one of the the top most famous places. Mm-hmm. So what are you guys hearing in terms of like where everyone's trying to concentrate?
Well, I've just heard a little bit from a few publishers that indeed the chef-driven cookbook, the chef cookbook, it's not selling. Even some pretty high-profile people who've published books in the last few years that are highly produced and the chefs are, super cool. They sell 30,000 copies, which is not what the advance was expecting. And some of that is because I put on the publisher's responsibility, because they're publishing books that people cannot cook from, even if they wanted to. That sort of super high-end chef that really is just a book to be admired and to get a sense of. And so I think even that, if it is a chef book, it needs to be a little more down to earth and deal with ingredients and dishes that people are going to make at home. So moving away from just the automatic, superstar is going to deserve a cookbook, and into things that are less expensive to produce. I mean, one thing that I do feel is kind of here to stay, and it makes sense because it solves a publisher's problem, which is choose an author that already has a bit of an audience built in. And, a TV star or a chef that's obvious, but now we have people who have their own followings because they have a podcast or because they, have a blog or are active in some other way. Because as we all know, it's not easy to make a great cookbook or magazine, but that's one aspect. But then you have to sell the darn thing. And so if you have an author who can contribute to the marketing, that really makes a difference, and it makes the publisher much more eager to work with someone like that.
The other thing I've seen, go ahead.
Just that we have more and more people coming to us and saying, I don't have a platform. My only option is, I'd like to learn about self-publishing, because publishers are becoming so risk averse. Their bottom line is really tricky to...
Yeah, publishers nowadays, they want to know how many Twitter followers do you have, and if you don't have however many tens of thousands, they don't even want to talk to you.
And it's no longer sort of a nice to have. I don't think it's a bonus. I think it's really the baseline has shifted, and you have to come with that, and you have to be prepared to pitch yourself and really put a lot of time and investment in. And that's another reason that people are beginning to think about self-publishing. They're thinking, why am I handing over all this the rights and the control, and I'm going to have to do all the work of moving books anyway, so I might as well.
I think that's true. And this is, I think, still true of most publishers. If your sales strategy is primarily trade first, if you're trying to sell your books through the regular channels, the traditional, to bookstores and to big box retailers, and that's when audience is huge. Costco is not going to buy 20,000 of your cookbook if the author has no reach. Right. But what I have seen, and I've definitely placed large bets on this, but I've seen other publishers doing the same, is specialty sales have opened up a lot of new opportunities for selling books. So that means everything that's not a bookstore. It could be Anthropology. They sell a ton of books.
I have personally had very good luck with that, I have to say. Rose All Day is at Anthropology, and Urban Outfitters, it's at Target.
And I'm guessing they maybe sell one or two different wine titles, right? Like yours and probably someone else's, or maybe just yours. And it's, not a lot of people get through the door. But if you do, you're set. They're going to sell a bunch of your book.
Yeah, and I think when you were asking earlier what attracts you to a cookbook, for me, design is huge. And I lucked out with Rose All Day in that there was a great illustrator connected to the project. And I think the reason it sells at Anthropology is it's cute, you know?
That cover looks really nice.
It's just
cute.
I aspire to someday publish a book that gets sold in Anthropology because the cover looks so great.
But 6 Seasons, Martha, is a beautiful book. And when I'm looking for a cookbook, I look for a book that really is going to look beautiful on my coffee table. And I have 6 Seasons, which Martha co-wrote with Josh McFadden, sitting out, on display because it's just a nice book to look at. And to your earlier point, there's not a picture of Josh McFadden on the cover.
There's not a picture on the cover, period.
Right.
There's no picture. And people outside of Oregon or outside of food circles maybe wouldn't know that he's the chef at Ava Jean's. So it's a beautiful book that sells on its own merits.
Yes. Yeah, it's a great vegetable book that happens to be written by a chef and his co-writer. Yeah, that's not the element that's going to sell the book. However, Joshua does have a zillion followers. He has been very active in all the marketing. So he's gone around the country doing the farm dinners and the book signings and this and that. So even in that case, we've had to hustle a lot to sell that book.
But I've seen that book is super merchandisable, and
Yeah.
I've seen it, in all sorts of stores. Men's
Yeah, and
stores,
for people who
lifestyle,
don't know what it
kitchen.
looks like, the cover is kind of almost a neutral linen-y with some line drawings of vegetables. There is a little cardboard thing that goes around that has some illustration, but it's a little more timeless looking, I would think. It does. You're not quite sure. Is this an old book or is it new? It's simple. It can fit with lots of different decor if you're talking about merchandising.
Right.
You don't have to
grabs-
call anyone out, but did you have any discussions or arguments about whether or not to, put a nice vibrant salad or photo on the cover, or was it always that everyone was in agreement on that?
Everybody was pretty much in agreement that we wanted vegetables of some kind and maybe with a little bit of grit and dirt. And we love that there's a celery salad picture that I believe is on that belly band that goes around it. And that we did mock up some covers with that. But an earlier iteration was a hand who's clearly been digging in the garden holding a bunch of beets, that looked like they were just kind of yanked up. I love where we ended because it's that same kind of rustic look, but it's not a look that we've seen before.
But I've seen those dirty hands holding those beets 1,000 times.
Exactly.
Yeah. No,
It's like the hand, the gesture holding
The
out
restraint here
vegetables.
is really sexy on that one.
Yeah.
You're sort of drawn to it.
So, Christina,
that
we do have to move on to our next topic, but did you work on Ethan Stowell's book? I'm a huge fan of Ethan Stowell, but I was thinking, that's the book with the chef on the cover. There's a picture of the chef. And how has that done?
I think it has done. I don't have any numbers, so I can't tell you. But yes, Leslie, again, one of the co-founders of Girl Friday, ghostwrote that one, and we always go to Ethan's restaurants when we're in Seattle as a result. And I don't have the numbers, but I think it's a beautiful book. I think it's still tricky. It's that chef model that can be hard. He has a lot of ways to get his name out there, and he has several restaurants in Seattle, and he's a big name, so he's working with a lot of advantages. But
Yeah. And I guess if you have a lot of restaurants, you can just sell your cookbook.
It's
at your
remarkable
restaurant.
how many copies you can move. I've worked on a couple that they've sold most of their copies at the restaurant or the
Right.
bar.
And that is
it's
something
crazy.
that makes a book deal very attractive to a publisher. If you come with your proposal and you say, I want to do this book and I have a restaurant and I'm committing to buy 5,000 copies that I'll sell myself. Well, that's a big chunk of sales that the publisher can count on right there. That covers a lot of their costs. Because, it's easy to rag on the publishers because, you feel like they held the purse strings and have but as someone who's been on both sides, I know how much investment goes into producing a book or a magazine. You're the writer, maybe it's your recipes and your ideas, but the publisher is coming up with the money to pay you, the money to pay a photographer, all the printing, all the shipping, all the marketing. So they really do need to be treated as an equal partner or a larger partner in this. And I think that authors, when they kind of get behind that and they understand, I have to do some marketing as well, you just get the most out of your publisher. The whole publishing act can be stronger and you can have a lot more success than when you just think, because publishers aren't getting rich.
no,
It's like,
Nick is.
Yes.
Short stack editions.
Yeah, right.
Well, on that note, let's move to our third course. Self-publishing goes ultra-luxe. I remember when a self-published cookbook was a stack of photocopied construction paper held together by metal rings. I think maybe we all had a family friend who produced one of those. And now it's gotten very fancy. So, Christina Henry de Tessan, you have worked at many traditional, or a couple traditional publishing houses like Chronicle Books, but now you're running this book production company that helps self-publishing clients, and not just everyday self-publishing clients, but clients like Nathan Myhrvold, whose cookbooks sell for, $600 and up? So what is going on with self-publishing? It's gotten very glamorous lately, hasn't it?
Well, Nathan's in a category sort of all his own. So, it's not as though he's, but it is an exciting time, and this may sound strange given that traditional publishing has been sort of bemoaning its fate for ages, but this is an exciting time for people who have a really distinct vision and the support to execute on it because and part of what's going on is that traditional publishing has always made the rules. They sort of had the keys to the kingdom. They had distribution. They had sales reps selling into bookstores. And there are a couple of big changes. One is the technology of print on demand has changed the nature of things so that if an author can upload their files and their book is suddenly available to anyone who can order it off the internet. And so we're not talking about print runs of 2,000 copies languishing in a garage that you have to hand sell. And then the other thing is that authors now have so much more access to their readers. They have a direct, with social media and so on. And so a lot of people are taking matters into their own hands. And it's kind of, what's nice is that it gives them a chance to break the rules. So Nathan is a perfect example of somebody who's really taken on a very, very audacious experiment. He's not a typical self-publisher in any sense of the word. And his books, his first series called Modernist Cuisine was several volumes, over 2,000 pages, and again, retails for over $625 and has sold over 200,000 copies. So no publisher would probably have come near that, And then he went on to do the 5-volume series on bread. And
because we needed 2,000 pages.
Yes. And that too has been. It's a beautiful book. You find yourself sort of swooning over these pictures of yeast and flour, and I think it's very exciting that he's doing these sort of genre-bending books that operate at the intersection of photography and science and food and cooking, and so I think he's leading the charge with that. But there are other people who are, the chef at Alinea also has a big success story. He got numerous offers for his book, very sizable advances, and then he read the fine print and went and did the math, and he too decided, this doesn't add up because they're not going to let me do the book I want to do. And he had a very specific vision, and he sent off his vision to numerous publishers who all turned him down and said, this will never sell. We can't do this. This is way too expensive and complex, and you can't possibly have this many images and so on. And he assembled his own team, put the book together, another great success story with over 100,000 copies sold, and he's working on book number 2. So I would say these are outliers, but it's still, people have more access, more opportunities than they used to have. And I think it's making for, I think this trend is only in its infancy. People are going to be able to do much, interesting things.
But you're talking about people like Grant Achatz and Nathan Myhrvold, who we were talking before about starting with a platform. These guys...
And a little bit of money in the bank.
They've got, Nathan Myhrvold was the CTO of Microsoft?
Yes.
He could, who knows how many millions he threw into opening his food lab before he even produced this book. So... This is not like the fan fiction that's self-published by someone in their bedroom.
We were talking about the ultra luxe end of the spectrum. I called them outliers for a reason. For the rest of us, it's self-publishing is it's a very exciting moment for people. It's still important. It's not for the faint of heart. It's for people with a business plan. It's for people who understand the work involved, who are prepared to assemble the right team and find the right experts and get help. And it helps. Yes, having a platform is very important. I have this conversation with people every day to make sure.
But it doesn't need to be a huge platform. Like, a much smaller scale success story. I worked with this guy a few years ago. He has a spice company and a little shop in New York, and he wanted to do a book and have it be heavily branded. So his spice blends recipes with those. No publisher was going to touch that because it requires you to go buy his stuff before you can cook. So he decided he was going to self-publish. I helped him along with that process. We made what I think was a really beautiful book. Wasn't too expensive to produce. We used the same printer who printed Modernist Cuisine. Thank you for that connection. And he was able to sell it in his store through his website, and over time made back, his investment, which was not a lot. It was, a couple tens of thousands of dollars versus hundreds of thousands or whatever.
Right.
Nathan and those guys spent on their books. The way that story ends, though, and I've seen this happen with other people who've self-published, is they make the book that they want, and a publisher sees that and like, oh, I can do something with that, or let's change that just a little bit. The Paula Wolfert book is, I think, a great example of that. So
which Paula Wolfert?
Friend of mine self-published. They kickstarted it and self-published a book with Paula, also kind of about Paula, and it was very successful very quickly. And I can't remember which publisher bought the rights to it, but they're republishing it, and so it works out.
Yeah, the self-publishing is almost like a proof of concept,
yes.
And then a larger publisher could pick it up and take it into different distribution channels. I mean, to me, it seems like what's changed and what's super exciting for anyone is that there are so many more tools available, like Christina was saying, the publishing on demand and digital photography and layout programs and things, so that on some level you can produce a book without the mysterious technical help. On the other hand, the fundamentals are still in place, whether it's self-published or published from a trade publisher. You have to market it and you have to sell it. And then I do think that a lot of people, they just aren't aware of all the production work and all the work that kind of is not visible, but it's not just like I wrote a recipe, I typed it up, I took a picture, now I have a book. There's a lot of, paper selection and trim size and the binding issues and all those things that go into making a book. And then where are you printing? In the U.S., in Asia, blah, blah, blah. And so self-publishing really isn't just one person anymore. You do need to have the publishing experts.
Well, and that's probably a different conversation. I won't geek out on that endlessly. But
well, actually, can I stop you and ask
Absolutely.
you to geek out about one thing? For those of us who don't know what printing on demand is, why is it different from publishing in previous decades?
Okay, so it used to be that if you wanted to self-publish, you could go to a traditional printer and there's a minimum requirement for, and it could be that you could publish a very small number, but it would still be in the hundreds or a couple of thousand copies. And then those boxes would arrive in your, at your house, and you'd put them in your garage, and you would be the one responsible for getting those out into the world. So now with print on demand, you can, go through production and design and ultimately upload those files to an online distribution company, like, for instance, Amazon. And every time someone wants to order your book, it will be printed at that point, and Amazon will fulfill the order, and it will just be sent out, and you will start to earn royalties. So suddenly you're not shipping to the post office. You're not responsible for the upfront costs of a print run, or returns, or getting into bookstores, or trying to find, the sales pipeline for this in the same way. You still are responsible for making. Nobody's going to know your book exists up there, and so that's a big part of what we are. I talk to people about every day is, you can self-publish successfully. It's a matter of making a really informed decision and knowing what's involved in all the work that is involved, and that it's more than you likely think it is. Second, knowing how you're going to reach your audience is hugely important. And knowing upfront how you're going to define success. So maybe it's, I know that I'm going to sell my book in my store about this very niche thing, and I have a cult-like following that's going to want that book, and that's all I need to do. But a lot of what I'm doing with people every day is sort of setting expectations around, and cookbooks to be, are more complicated production-wise, as Martha was saying. So there's a lot of recipe testing and a lot of very technical editorial work and production work that goes into them. So it's not that it shouldn't be done, but it's worth knowing what you're getting into before you commit to it.
Well, and here's something I think most people don't know, and it's true for magazines on the newsstand too, is books are sold sort of on consignment. So if I'm a bookstore and I'll say, oh, I love Nick's book, let's order 10 copies, and then we only sell 4 copies, and it's getting kind of tired on the shelf, or I want to make room for something else, I send back the 6. And I only get charged for the ones that I sell. So as an author, you look at your very complicated royalty statements and you'll see well, there are, X number of thousand in print, but they're holding back some for return because we expect some of those to come back. So it's, the publisher again is taking a risk of making something that might not actually get sold.
That's another reason why specialty retailers are such a nice option, because most of them don't do returns.
Okay, right.
So you don't have to deal with that.
Right, they just buy it.
Well, I don't think I'm brave enough to self-publish a book after this conversation, but it's been very interesting. I think it's time to move on to our dessert course, in which we each share something foodie or beveragey that we've been enjoying this week. I'll go first. My brother is a starving artist living in Berlin, and his fabulous girlfriend always sends these great boxes of wonderful things to my kids at Christmas, all these wonderful German chocolates and things. But this year, there was something for me in the box, and I've been really enjoying it. It's an original Buckelsmesser style knife from Solingen, Germany. And Solingen is apparently a well-known knife-producing town in Germany. And this is the traditional German breakfast knife. And it just looks like a simple sandwich knife with a wooden handle, and it's got a rounded tip. But the blade is so thin and so sharp that it solves the problem of you can slice the tomato, which I can never...
Is it serrated?
No, but you can still slice through the tomato and spread the mayonnaise or the butter.
Oh, very nice.
It kind of solves this perennial problem
Yes.
that at least I have in my kitchen. So I love this knife. Check it out. It's called the Buckelsmesser. I probably pronounced that wrong, but anyway, I'm enjoying it. Nick, what did you bring for dessert today?
Okay, two small things. Funniest thing I saw last week was on Saturday Night Live last weekend, and it was a spoof of a commercial for a family diner with Will Ferrell and Kate McKinnon playing this older, somewhat befuddled couple trying to read the right lines about the chicken pot pie.
Baked in a flaky bacon bag.
Pastry, Dan.
Baked in a crusty turd.
Dan, crispy.
Baked in a bust. In my buttery buddy bust.
My wife and I saw it, and we thought it was hilarious. I looked it up online, and it turns out it's an almost take-for-take remake of an actual video that a restaurant in Maine shot. So they released a bloopers reel of this commercial that they shot with an older couple. God bless them. And if you go online and Google it, you'll see the original blooper reel, and it's at least as funny as the sketch. The other thing that I saw last week that was probably the scariest thing I've seen in a long time involving food was a video that Vanity Fair posted that they had shot with Nicole Kidman, and it's I think it's called, I wrote it down, Nicole Kidman Eats Bugs, and it's set in this Victorian drawing room, velvet curtains, very fancy, and she's sitting there with these platters, and she opens it up, and they're full of live insects, and she eats them with such pleasure.
These are exquisite grasshoppers. I recommend them to anyone.
And I was already kind of afraid of Nicole Kidman, and this completely confirmed all the things I was worried about. She loves eating bugs. In real life, she is a bug enthusiast, and part of her diet.
As we all know,
it's the future.
It's the future.
I'm never going to
protein.
I'm never going to unknow that.
You can never unwatch it, so be careful if you look it up.
Oh my goodness, that's crazy.
I don't know whether to thank you for sharing that. Thank you, though. Martha, what did you bring
Well,
for us?
my dessert idea would help those bugs go down a little bit more easily if I had to eat bugs. And it's an olive oil that I'm super excited about. I must go through, a gallon of olive oil a week, as we all should. It's such a wonderful ingredient. And the brand is called Seka Hills, S-E-K-A, and the olive groves are on some reservation land by a Native American tribe in the Capay Valley of California. And I'm afraid I don't have the name of the tribe. It's not a name that I was familiar with. But they, a few years ago, looked at all this agricultural land they had and thought, what would be a great thing for us to do? And while that's not a traditional crop that they are growing and producing some beautiful oil. And right now their new oil that's just from they harvested probably in November or December. And so the oil is very fresh and amazingly tasting. It's on the market. I bought it, I know, at Providore, which is a lovely store in Portland, and it's in a few other stores around here. And it's not super expensive. You get a new crop oil from, say, an Italian producer, and you're going to be paying, $30, $40, $50. I believe this was like $18 or $20 for a 16-ounce bottle, and it's really great. And then their regular oil, when it's not new anymore, is also, I like to have an olive oil that I can use for cooking and put it in my frying pan, but also is tasty and bright and fresh enough to use raw, just as a drizzle. So Sika Hills is my new little pleasure.
Oh, that sounds good. Christina, what did you bring for us?
I'm going to go check that olive oil out. It was so hard to pick just one thing. And this is hardly a secret, but it is my new passion. I was given Yotam Ottolenghi's and Helen Go's new book, Sweet, for Christmas, and I've been swooning over it for the last few weeks. And it actually speaks to a lot of the things we've been talking about here today in terms of design and personal narrative and people who look like they're having a lot of fun in the kitchen. And I can highly recommend the coffee and cardamom swirl pound cake. And yes, on these cold, gray days, I'm about ready to abandon my life and go and beg for a job as a pastry chef in one of his cafes in London. He makes it look really, really fun.
It's cold and gray in London, though.
That's true. That's true. But there's something about the atmosphere there and the pictures. I just feel it has to be better.
And there you've got a cookbook that's beautiful design, celebrity chef name. You got everything, right?
All of those things.
You want it on your coffee table.
I'm hooked. Yes, I do.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks to all you panelists. Christina, Henry de Tessan, at Girl Friday, you can produce people's self-published books for them. But what people may not know about you is that you're also an author. And I love Christina's book, Forever Paris. It's a walking guide to the city of Paris, and you can follow in the footsteps of your favorite historical Parisian celebrity like Gertrude Stein or Edith Piaf or Coco Chanel or Ernest Hemingway. It's a really fun way to explore the city. So I think everyone should check it out. Thanks for being here. And Martha Holmberg, author or co-author. How many cookbooks have you authored or co-authored? 8, something like that?
Something like that. 2 co-authors, and then, yeah.
Including Plums from Short Stack Editions. And Nick Fauchald, who is the editorial director of Little Sue, a new experiential media company that celebrates families and food. And it's launching this spring at mylittlesue.com, and Sue is S-O-U-S, like sous chef. So I can't wait to check that out.
Thank you.
Today's episode was recorded in the high-fiber, protein-packed city of Portland, Oregon, in the studios of OPB. You can read all about us on the OPB website. Our editor is Alex Ward. Special thanks to OPB sound supervisor Stephen Cray. And our theme music was performed by the incomparable wine importer Kermit Lynch. If you like our James Beard Award-winning show, please help us out. Rate us on iTunes, subscribe to The Four Top on your favorite podcast app, and please tell your friends about us. You can tweet us at @4top, check out our Instagram or visit our Facebook page, and post your thoughts about the show. We would love to hear from you. Bye-bye.
Nuit blanche, nuit blanche, nuit blanche.